Now let's talk just a little bit and look at some code on using the IEnumerable interface. Now the IEnumerable interface is relatively simple when you first read about it, but it gets a little more complex to implement. But this thing's really nice. It has one single member to implement, and that is a method called getEnumerator, which is used to go out there and create an enumerator object. In other words, we're going to have basically an enumerator class out there that we've got to build, then return that object as part of the interface. And this class that we're going to build is going to return an object that gives us the ability to iterate through a collection by exposing a current property, a move next, and a reset method. Now, IEnumerable is the base interface for all non-generic collections that can be enumerated. Now, keep in mind, when we're developing with C#, we'll have to provide a class that is returned by that getEnumerator method that contains that current property of move next and reset methods as described by enumerator. However, that class does not have to implement IEnumerator. You'll see that out there in examples all over the place. The only thing we have to implement here is IEnumerable, and then just provide that functionality in the class that's returned by our getEnumerator method. If that sounds confusing, it's only because it is a little bit, and you'll see it in code in just a moment. Now keep in mind, IEnumerable, this interface is a part of most of the data types, and so we normally have this built in. However, when we're building our own custom objects, then it doesn't know how to do that, and that's why we're having to provide this functionality. The best way to understand this guy is to see it in code. Now there's going to be a fair amount of code here, so I'm going to cut and paste a lot of this stuff and talk you through it. And what you really should do is either go through and build all this yourself, or just look at the example code that I'll include in the work files folder, and it will be entitled something very similar to IEnumerable example. And you can just kind of step through it and see how it's working. And so what we're going to do here is let's jump out into Visual Studio, and notice I'm going to create a project called IEnumerable example, and then I'm just going to jump out here and drop a button on a form, and we're going to go through the process of creating an object and then trying to load that object up with some items and then just iterate through it, and you'll see the problem right away. Give me just a minute for my toolbox to load up. There it is. I'll double click button, and that will drop a button onto my form. Actually, I did that a little bit differently, so I can just draw this. And so there's my button. And so now I will just simply jump into the code behind here. Let me reposition my mouse a little bit here so that I can talk and type at the same time. There we go. And so now what I want to do is I want to take a look at on my form. What I want to do is click this button and click off this process here of working with this particular IEnumerable interface. But what I want to do first is build this thing without it, okay? And so the first thing I'm going to do is go create a class that I'm going to use, and I'll just go over here and right click on my project, and I will choose add, and then I'll choose a class, and I'm going to create a guitar class. Okay, we're going to basically manage a list of guitars. So there's the guitar.cs class. And in the guitar class, I'm just going to copy in some code. The first thing we're going to do is create a little string collection here, string array if you will. And I'll just copy this in so that you can see it, so you don't have to see me type all this. And so there is my little string. That's my collection of guitars. Notice it's a little array here called guitars. And then I'm going to stop right there, okay? And then I will go back to my form code. And this is my button click handler right here. And I'm going to create a new instance of that class. So I will put this in, and then I'll start to do a for each here, okay? Because I know I've already got those 4 entries into that little collection, and so I'm going to do a for each for string, and I'll create a variable here for each guitar in G. I am going to also, let me go back out to my design. I'm going to drop a list box on here. Okay, so I'll put that there. I'll go into toolbox. I'll grab my list box and I'll just leave the default there. That'll be list box 1. Then I'll go back into my code, and for each one of these I'm going to do list box 1.add items first.add, and then I'll add that string guitar. Okay. Now notice immediately I get a compilation error right here on for each, and it is saying for the for each statement cannot operate on variables of type IEnumerable example guitar, because that object IEnumerable example, which is the name of our solution in our project guitar, does not contain a public definition of get enumerator. So this is another example where for each functionality is looking for that get enumerator and it doesn't see it. So we're going to have to provide that, and that is what this IEnumerable interface is going to basically cause us to do. So what I'm going to do is stop right here. This will be the end of part 1. Join me in part 2 and we will complete this. And this, by the time we get this completed, the light should click on about how to make IEnumerable work for you.